Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving you extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. Hopefully this will be a little bit shorter than my previous videos today that have been quite long. I'm going to start by talking about the Russian response to the Ukrainian drone attack on Moscow yesterday, and then talk about drones. Statement by the Russian Foreign Ministry in connection with the Ukrainian attempt to commit terrorist acts in the Moscow region. The Russian Foreign Ministry strongly condemned the attempts of terrorist attacks by the armed forces of Ukraine that took place early in the morning of May the 30th in Moscow and the Moscow region. According to the MOD of Russia, the attacks were carried out with the use of 8 aircraft type UAVs, drones. All of them were hit by Russian air defense systems and the electronic warfare, EW. 5 drones were shot down by anti-aircraft missile systems, as a Pantsir S, and 3 more drones were suppressed by electronic warfare. I think I reported this morning in my news video that it was 3 and 5, not 5 and 3. But anyway, as a result of which they lost control and deviated from their intended goals. Unfortunately, the lost control of the drones fell on multi-story residential buildings in the area of the State Farm Moscow on Lenin Avenue and Trade Union Street. According to specialized services, there were no one seriously affected by their fall. This is, I guess, good that they're saying that the Ukrainians weren't targeting those residential buildings. Those residential buildings were hit by falling drones that were taken out by electronic warfare or by missile systems. So there is that. The investigative committee of Russia opened a criminal case on this fact. We are sure that all persons involved in it will certainly be found and will suffer severe punishment. Do they accept that that's going to happen to the people who have sent literally hundreds and hundreds of cruise missiles against Kyiv and Ukrainian cities, Lviv, Odessa? Okay. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? These attacks were planned and committed by the neo-Nazi Kyiv regime. What we can do is switch that and say these attacks on Ukraine were planned and committed by the neo-Nazi Kremlin regime. See, works just as well. For which the use of methods of acts of terror has become an ominous practice. Again, you could flip that, and it's even more pertinent to what has been taking place in Ukraine. Its representatives have long openly called for the retribution of in Moscow, attacks in Moscow. Such attacks having no meaning from a military point of view. Oh, you are getting on thin ice, Russian Foreign Ministry here. You have just been hammering Ukrainian civilian infrastructure for a year. You've had 30 wooden drones drop out of the sky in Moscow, and you're trying this one on? No meaning from a military point of view seem to be directed exclusively against the civilian population. No, you just said they fell out of the sky on civilian multi-story buildings because of electronic warfare. In order to sow panic among civilians. West support for the Kyiv regime is pushing the Ukrainian leadership to increasingly reckless criminal acts. I don't think I've ever read anything so hypocritical as this. It's just outrageous, including acts of terrorism, violation of international humanitarian law, and war crimes. Oh, this is just embarrassing projection. The assurances of NATO officials that the Kyiv regime will not strike deep into Russian territory are absolutely hypocritical. The Russian side reserves the right to take the most stringent measures in response to the terrorist attacks of the Kyiv regime. Let's turn that around, considering that Russia has sent how many hundreds of missiles? How many hundreds of cruise missiles? How many hundreds of Shaheeds? How many ballistic missiles? I mean, we're probably talking over 1,000 projectiles into Ukraine over the last year and a half, or year and a third, I guess. Here, well, we could change that. The Ukrainian side reserves the right to take the most stringent measures in response to the terrorist attacks of the Kremlin regime. Just is not worth the paper, the digital paper this is typed on. Just dismissed. But anyway, let's talk about drones a little bit. So Trent Telenko, who's big on logistics and whatnot, also has his finger in a number of different topical pies. In the last few hours, Ukraine has struck the posh Moscow neighborhood where Russian oligarchs live with what looks like a converted Foxtech Rex 340 Canard VTOL compound helicopter drone. Interesting, because I don't know that they targeted that neighborhood, or there are some claims that they did because it's where all the posh elites live. But reporting from Ukraine said it's also where there's a military base nearby, and the electronic warfare, as these drones come in to attack the military base, will send them to then fly off in different directions and then drop nearby, which would be in that posh neighborhood. But also, it has the added benefit that it freaks out the elites who then put pressure on the Kremlin. So he then talks about this thread that goes into Ukraine's growing drone and missile strike capabilities, which we have seen. They can strike quite a distance into Russia. So you can buy a Chinese Foxtech Rex 340 online for $42,000 from Alibaba. 6 hours endurance at 25 meters per second cruise speed works out at 525 kilometers straight line distance with a 10-minute operational reserve to land. Ukraine likely put between 10,000 and 35,000 K of materials, time, and labor effort per drone just to get one of the 25 munitions to hit in the middle of the densest ADA network and in the most GPS jamming denied airspace on the planet a second time. The world has changed. I mean, the idea that, I mean, Shoigu said after the Kremlin drone attacks, which themselves, again, people still argue about who did that. Would the Ukrainians been able to have done that in the most densely electronically jammed airspace? Or is that more likely to be localized Russians, dissidents, or pro-Ukrainian Russians? I don't know, whatever. But after that, Shoigu said you ain't going to get a drone within 70 kilometers or whatever of Moscow, or something. He said something to that effect, and then just a month or so later, 30 of them end up in Moscow airspace. Ukraine. So he said the world has changed, and I say a second time because the success now means a previous drone strike wasn't the false flag that I and others thought at the time. I don't know. Well, I don't think it's I thought false flag was the least likely, but it's whether it was Ukrainians or pro-Ukrainians or anti-Kremlin Russian actors within Russia. Ukraine is better with drones than I thought, and I consider them in the top 5 militaries worldwide. Basically, Ukraine has disruptively innovated a 500-kilometer class propeller cruise missile military capability that can operate out of the back of an SUV for the price of a TOW anti-tank missile. The video I posted said it takes one man less than 10 minutes to set up one Rex 340. He said, what is disruptive innovation? Let's just talk about that for a second. Disruptive innovation refers to the innovation that transforms expensive or highly sophisticated products or services previously accessible to the high-end or more skilled segment of consumers to those that are more affordable and accessible to a broader population. The transformation disrupts the market by displacing long-standing established competitors. Key takeaways. Disruptive innovation refers to innovations and technologies that make expensive or sophisticated products and services accessible and made affordable to a broader market. It refers to the use of technology that upsets a structure as opposed to disruptive technology, which refers to the technology itself. Amazon, launched as an online bookstore in the mid-1990s, is an example of disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation requires enabling technology and an innovative business model and a coherent value network. Sustaining innovation is the process of innovating to improving products and services for existing customers. Okay. So that gives you that idea of what disruptive innovation is. Right. A single box truck with 3 guys could make a swarm of 25 of these drones, could move a swarm of 25 of these drones anywhere the truck can reach, set up and launch a strike capable of penetrating Moscow airspace in about 90 minutes. And this at the cost of, and this would cost Ukraine between $1.3 million and $1.925 million to pull off. In other words, that's really cheap for a project of that size for 30 odd effectively long distance munitions being sent into a capital city. I mean, that is really significant. We are still in the fog of war, but we are seeing patterns similar to the 1986 Operation El Dorado Canyon F-111 strike on Libya. Small drones flying low over buildings like F-111s over Tripoli can cause proximity fuses to detonate SAM warheads over buildings. Ukraine's chief of the GUR, Spook Budanov, told Russia yesterday that they would regret the attacks on Kyiv. The question for me is, why only 23 to 25 drones? Or 30 odd, depending on what numbers you believe. If Ukraine has 1,000 Rex 340 and fired them as a Moscow time on target, they would have gotten several hundred hits after running the VKS SAM launchers out of missiles. A couple of hundred Rex 340s into the Russian Defense Ministry is far stronger message than giving Russian oligarchs a code brown with one hit. You can buy and convert 1,000 Rex 340 for $80 million. We know from David Hambling that Ukraine just bought out the world supply of Chinese racing drones for FPV attack drone conversion. Trevor Phillips Levine's War on the Rocks article, The Art of Supply Chain Interdiction to Win Without Fighting, details this Ukrainian bit of racing drone economic warfare. It's an utter hoot. And this is quite interesting, which is like, if you buy up the entire supply, it's a zero-sum game. Like, not only do you have it, but the Russians don't have it. So it's just an economic gain. And there, China are going to sell to the highest bidder. Absolutely sure. Not only individual Chinese companies wanting the most profit, but the Chinese government. I've long said that I don't think they'd mind it if Russia loses, because actually I think they would gain more out of Russia losing than Russia winning. Did Ukraine do the same with the Rex 340 class drones? The cost trades here for both the X-340 cruise missile conversion and the 50k to 100,000 Ukrainian FPV drones mark the beginning of a new age of warfare. A dreadnought moment where disruptively cheap drone swarms are emerging as the predominant military weapon of choice. Ukraine has trained 10,000 drone operators. This is one per every 100 Ukrainian servicemen. We are likely going to see 50 organic drone operators per Ukrainian ground brigade in their 18 brigade strategic reserve, with more in supporting drone companies. Think something on the order of 300 Ukrainian drone operators in the break-in assault sectors, sending waves of FPV drones every 10 to 15 minutes all day for the first couple of days in the break-in and a pass-through of the exploitation force. Behind that, Russian train infrastructure up to 450 kilometers behind the lines will be struck. Think step-down transformers for electrified train lines, diesel storage for diesel engines, and train switching equipment with Rex 340 class drones in lieu of Storm Shadow and GMLRS. This is like hugely significant. I talked about this back when the news of the 10,000 drone operators came out, and I showed you some of that imagery of all those drones and said, this is frightening, like frightening for the Russians. The capability of the Ukrainians with that massive capacity has just suddenly changed up a gear. And when you think of what they can do with this coming counteroffensive, and this might be why they're waiting, is going to be about whether it's going to be about experience, like training, it's going to be about equipment, but also trying to work out what you're going to do with 10,000 drone operators and how to most effectively screw over the Russians. From a Ukrainian point of view, that's really quite exciting. They've got some ability going forward. Anyway, Storm Shadows would be reserved for hard targets and GMLRS for time-critical targets within its range. Swarms of Alibaba Specials will be, just to let you know, Alibaba is like the Chinese version of Amazon. Right, so they don't have Amazon there, they have Alibaba. Swarms of Alibaba Specials will be for all the immobile and soft logistical targets in the operational rear, like rails and power, that support JIT, just-in-time artillery and fuel needs. There are not enough surface-to-air missiles, air defense autocannons, or electronic warfare jammers in all the world to stop 50,000 to 100,000 first-person view drones in the hands of 10,000 Ukrainian combat-trained drone operators, let alone in Russia. The age of the armed drone swarm is upon us. And there you go. Wow. Wow. Okay, let's go and look at a linked article here, which is Kyiv Independent. Before the war, Ukraine's IT companies were transforming the country into an emerging digital leader. Now these companies are also transforming Ukraine into a military innovator. Great article, this in Kyiv Independent by Agatha Korsky. So let's dip into some of it. Before Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, 27-year-old engineer Maxim Sheremet was engaged in the manufacturing of commercial drones. He worked for the state defense company Ukroboronprom, a strategic manufacturer of weapons and military hardware in Ukraine, and later at Evolve Dynamics, a UK engineering company specializing in unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, and remotely piloted aircraft systems and software. Quote, I produced commercial drones from a university age, but back then it was not needed at all, he says. Then the full-scale war broke out as Russia was gaining territory in Kyiv and at the risk of siege. Sheremet decided to take action. In March 2022, he assembled his own volunteer organization of 10 people, piecing together attack drones from donated components and everything available to be used to strike Russian positions. More than a year later, drones have become an essential part of the Ukrainian military arsenal. They are used to conduct surveillance, reconnaissance, and attacks on Russian forces and territory. Drones also deliver supplies like medicine to Ukrainian positions and assist in evacuating civilians from frontline areas. Sheremet's organization has grown to include a research and development team with 20 employees and more than 100 volunteers, manufacturing hundreds of drones in its lab. Now, quote, now is the greatest, proudest moment to see my work in use, he says. And there he is with some pretty sizable drones. We saw a 6-propeller drone, bigger than those ones, I think, lifting up a broken Orlan 10 drone, which is a pretty sizable drone itself, from a mined field. So you couldn't go in and get that themselves. They went and hooked it up from a massive drone and brought it down. That's the sort of size drone that could possibly even lift up an injured person or something near that anyway. Probably not, but we have seen UK drones be able to do that. Drone Lab is not the only IT company in Ukraine working on developing innovative military technology. Before the war, Ukraine's IT companies were transforming the country into an emerging digital leader. Now these companies are also transforming Ukraine into a military innovator. It goes on to give some examples of this. Traditional military production, but I'll join it later, follows the waterfall approach. In a waterfall method, the entire set of requirements for a solution must be identified before building the product, and testing only occurs once the product is entirely constructed. Startups opt for an agile approach, prioritizing the most critical requirements and tackling problems as they arise. For Ukraine, time is of the essence. Solutions must come fast, and testing new products during combat offers an opportunity to enhance essential features and functionality in real life situations and in real time. This is why startups are winning, Vasilyeva said. Embracing the second approach has allowed Ukraine to adapt swiftly and effectively to the evolving demands of the military landscape. In the first 6 months of the war, the number of Ukrainian companies producing unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, UAVs, commonly referred to as drones, increased more than 5-fold, according to Minister of Digital Transformation Mikhailo Fedorov. Amongst new inventions, is a naval drone that helps guard against missile attacks launched by Russian warships, Fedorov wrote in a piece for the Atlantic Council. Moreover, promising progress has been made in developing maritime drones that can target, deter, or disable warships, according to Fedorov. I shared a piece with you on a drone that's something I've been thinking about myself, thinking, well, surely this is a cool idea. And then lo and behold, and I think I remember saying, I thought about it the night before, and the next day an article came out which was talking about these torpedo drones that you could send off to hang outside, like, say, for example, Sevastopol port, and then they would just hang there until a ship came out, and then they would fire and go and shoot at that. So it's basically like a uh, autonomous torpedo, but it can just hang out dormant until it's needed. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of. It's quite incredible. But it's not just drones. Breakthroughs in other spheres like cybersecurity and AI are also emerging, with some startups are starting to combine multiple types of technology in their inventions. A month ago, Ukrainian agricultural startup eFarm Pro released a new unmanned complex for demining fields, including a drone, a demining robot, an autopilot, and a tractor trailer that can withstand an explosion. Successful results have prompted investment to accelerate the building process, and goodness me, the investment is coming thick and fast, I think. On April the 26th, the Ukrainian government launched the defense tech cluster Brave One, which acts as a unifying platform for defense tech in Ukraine to create an entry point for cooperation between private companies and the government government, military, and investors. The government has so far set aside $2.7 million to fund tech projects that could help Ukraine win the war. To fund the procurement for drones for the military, the government last year also launched the Army of Drones fundraiser as part of the United 24 platform. And last time I looked, they were what, $340 million or something they raised. And where are these 10,000 drone operators and all those drones going to come from? Well, United 24. I mean, wow. The initiative secured over 1,700 drones worth of tens of millions of dollars in half a year, and a lot more since then. One of the companies that hope to benefit from the government's Brave One cluster is Aspici. Co-founder Viktor Samoylenko and Max Goncharuk were 2 weeks before the full-scale invasion. The startup focused on providing audio and visual teleportation services based on 360-degree video and VR, virtual reality technologies. Their technology allows one person wearing a necklace-like device with multiple 360 cameras to capture their surroundings in audio and video, which is then streamed to another person wearing a virtual reality headset, providing a first-person audio-visual teleportation experience. These aspirations were quickly put to the test as 2 weeks later the all-out war began and Aspici shifted gears to military technology. Today, the company is working on several products. They include a guided meditation application for soldiers, implemented in rehabilitation clinics, a supervision system for demining, and a VR technology that allows for transmission of 360-degree videos from the battlefield. Ukraine's growing military industry has caught the attention of many foreign investors, and it goes into detail about some of those investors that are going to be looking at this, going, "Hang on, there's something to be gained from this," and money will pour in because they'll be thinking that this technology will then be in demand from militaries around the world. A recent study by Enrico Moretti, Claudia Steinwender, and John Van Reenen of the University of California at Berkeley found that expenditure for defense-related research and development is the most important driver of innovation. This reminded me of an article I wrote back in 2016. Space versus prayer. Sorry, is a little bit critical there. What has space exploration ever done for us? And there was a meme that inspired this that made me think. Well, I was then challenged by a particularly religious person. Said, "Well, if you're saying prayer doesn't work as well as science or whatever, what has space exploration ever done for us?" And that made me think, well, what has space exploration ever done for us? Lots of people have written on this, so it's quite easy for me to research. And actually, there's loads of tech that we use on a daily basis that we wouldn't have access to, or we wouldn't have if it wasn't for space exploration. So you can say, why are we spending billions of gazillions of dollars on space exploration? But actually, out of these things often come, and it may be kind of semi-accidental, but the collateral of doing that kind of work is that we then do loads of research and innovation in these technological areas, and as a result, you get things like mobile phones and batteries for electric vehicles, and I don't know. Let's look at a couple of examples that I had in here. So we have less obvious and most important benefit is spin-off technologies. Some scientists have already hypothesized that if a civilization from another part of space were to make first contact with Earth, their technology would be several orders of magnitude more advanced than ours, because many scientific and technological milestones they would need to achieve to make the feat even possible. Really interesting that now, 7 years later, that is a really important component of the book me and my co-author have just written, Aliens and Religion: Where Two Worlds Collide, talking about actually how far advanced civilizations would have to be in order to do this kind of stuff. And you have to have real technological advancements, and that kind of the will to go into space actually advances you technologically. So we're surrounded every day by technologies developed for space exploration. The artificial heart resulted from experiments on the space shuttle, partnership with a renowned heart surgeon, Dr. DeBakey. Handheld jaws of life used to save victims from car wrecks, home insulation, as I said, mobile phones, I think, advances in our food technology, medical procedures, the cars that we drive, building materials, so on and so forth. I mean, there's loads of stuff that does. Now, you transfer that back to here, and there'll be loads of things coming out of the need to find innovative ways around problems in this military sphere here for the Ukrainians. They will be wanting to solve the issues that are thrown up by the Russians, by the frontline constrictions, by the need to do X and Y and Z, and they will necessarily be innovating and creating this technology. Some of it will have applications well outside the military sphere, and a lot of it, of course, will be directly relevant for the military sphere as well. And so investors will be knowing about this, and there will just be a huge, I think, technological explosion, or at least a meaningful technological explosion that will be as a kind of direct result of this war. This war has suddenly made people like this go back to the drawing board and think, right, now I can apply all the skills that I've learned. Previously it was just kind of bumbling along doing this and that, but there was no kind of need driving me. Now there's this really obvious need to have technological solutions to huge military problems, um, that will uh, promote a growth in technological advancement. And yeah, it will be quite exciting, also quite worrying when you think about some of the military applications, and when you start thinking about autonomous uh, um, munitions or autonomous vehicles, uh, when you start walking down the road towards a world in which the Terminator films are a potential reality. So there are obviously some. I mean, this is all wrapped up with the issues around artificial intelligence, of course. But exciting times, technologically speaking, and potentially worrying times too. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have for you today. I thought I'd keep it a little bit shorter. You've got stuff to do. It's a beautiful day outside, or it's not, but I'm sure you can do without just looking at my stupid face all day. So thank you so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate your support. Thanks to all the members, Toodle Pips, and I will speak to you soon.